Okay, welcome to the Anime Rambling Boys podcast.
Okay.
I am Riki.
I am Silver.
I'm Bass.
This is our first episode, and we're going to be talking about Kaguya Sama, Love is War.
Oh, love me, mister. Oh, mister. You may shine now.
おかわいいこと
Love is war.
Kaguya Sama. So, general impressions of the show, gentlemen. What did you think? And I think the three of us did rewatch it. We'd seen Kaguya before, and it's actually interesting, at least to me, upon the rewatch, there were certain things that I caught that I hadn't noticed before, which were interesting. So, like, for example, there's like the first time that they introduce Hayasaka is as part of like one of by the way, Justice for Hayasaka is as part of one of Kaguya's schemes where she was like in the background, sort of subliminally trying to get like Shirogane to buy a cell phone, like a new cell phone. That was like one example.
I just also want to say straight up, I'm pretty bad with names of like
Me too, yeah.
like the side characters. Like obviously Kaguya, Miyuki, and Yui, and like Chika. Like obviously I got those four.
I mean, they're
When
the
it
ones
comes-
who matter.
When you said Hayasaka, I'm like, oh yeah, that one. So
I haven't read the manga, but apparently she's best girl in the manga. That's what folks say.
Oh.
But we can all universally agree upon the fact that best boy is the narrator.
Narrator is the best character in this entire show. Without the narrator, the show wouldn't be as good as it is.
Oh yeah, no, definitely would not. The narrator enhanced my aspects of the show. In fact, I guess I can just say I like the show. It's a good show, very good. On my first watch through, I definitely took a very casual approach to it and was just like, wow, look at this funny, quirky, this is like a nice show. On my second watch through, my rating of it didn't change. Like I still enjoyed it a lot, but like the reasons I did enjoy it slightly changed, and the reasons I may have not liked it as much also slightly changed. But overall, I think it's a good show. You should, if you are into anime or if you're into rom-coms and you like humor and like high schoolers doing stuff, you should definitely watch it. We can get in more details later. So like Silver, what did you think?
Well, so I went into it with very low expectations. I have a really high bar for comedy, considering Gintama is my favorite anime of all time. Nothing will ever come close. So when I heard it was a comedy, I was like, okay, I'll give it a try. I need something to fill the hole in my heart after finishing Gintama. I was very pleasantly surprised. It was so funny. Definitely very overdramatic in all the good ways. The best way I can describe it is every like because each episode is split up into like 3 mini stories, which I think is a great way to do it.
Yeah.
The best way I can describe the entire anime is the very dramatic potato chip scene from Death Note, but all in the entire anime. That's the entire anime.
Wow, actually you're like very correct.
Now I feel weird because I haven't watched Death Note, although, sort of traveling in like the circles of like anime YouTube, there's plenty of videos on the infamous potato chip scene.
It is an iconic moment in anime history.
But anyways, so I think when I first watched this show, I'd been working on like my senior research thesis for college, and I just like kind of was not in like a super happy place, and I just kind of found this anime, and instead of like working on like my senior research thesis, I just kind of like binged the anime because I just thought it was so funny, and like I love like the psychological warfare aspects of it. But I guess I didn't really, and like I don't know, like the humor, like splitting it up into like 3 mini episodes within each episode, I thought was really interesting. Although I gotta say, going back to it, I'm kind of paying a bit more attention to like the fact that it seems like there's like which is not necessarily a bad thing. Some folks really focus on like overarching plots, but it feels like there's less of like an overarching plot happening within the show than there might be ideal perhaps. Like the fact that Kaguya, you know, comes from this like upper class family and all the expectations of that. It seems like we see a bit of this at like in like the final arc, you know, which is actually like one could say like the only arc maybe
The only
like
real
the
arc,
only
yeah.
real arc, which is like the fireworks arc or
Yeah,
whatever. We're
we
just
could
gonna
talk
call
about
it
that that ending that
Yeah.
left me a little. I'm just saying right now, I didn't like the ending so much. I felt it just stopped when we finally had our first arc, and then
Yeah.
it just sort of ended. And it sort of me was like, oh, now we're not doing episodic things. Like, sure, there is a long running theme that goes across the show, but it sort of made me like, oh, I want a season 2, but not even just like, wow, that was a solid season 1. I want season 2. I was more just like, it just kind of ended, and I feel like I ultimately the questions I had at the beginning of like how this is going to develop in the future weren't really answered. I felt
Mm-hmm.
so personally. Upon the second rewatch too, knowing that it sort of kind of recontextualized all the other little events, and it did make me think like, well, you could have maybe like changed some of the episodes orders around, or maybe like saved some of these more slice of life, like just episodes that you can just kind of, you know, eat and throw away for maybe later in the production. Obviously, you're following the manga. I assume, I haven't read the manga, but I assume that they're following the structure of the manga.
I actually
But
think they're not following it like exactly as it's happening in the manga. I'm not entirely sure. I this is just something that I remember reading about at some point.
I also
But
have never read the manga, so
yeah, me neither. So maybe some like manga listeners, when we have like one or two fans that can sort of elucidate us as to this. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to keep track of.
right. But basically, yeah, those last like couple episodes, I was like, wow, we're actually progressing. Like there are movements being made. Like people are actually getting closer. Like they've stopped being as antagonistic towards each other. You can definitely see the growth of Miyuki and Kaguya of actually being friends. Like,
Mhm.
and that's like I think important in the development of any sort of relationship to actually, you know, like being around the person you're with in a capacity that like you can hang out. And then the fireworks happen, and then and it's all really dramatic, and the car, and you're like following along, and you're like kind of rooting for them, because that's like I guess the ultimate goal of a rom-com. You're supposed to root for the couple. Actually, I shouldn't say that. That's what I got out of it. I was rooting for them to get together, but I wanted to see like the progression of it. And then when it sort of just ended, and there was no definite, well, do they acknowledge each other's friendship now? Are they cool, or are we still like on like square one, where it's like, oh, like they maybe inched closer, but they haven't really taken any definitive steps yet?
Yeah. It'd be interesting to look into this, and this is just speculation. I have a couple comments. The first one is, it seems like this could have been one of those shows that really benefited from having like a 24 episode season as opposed to like a 12 episode season, because they spent so much of the beginning just like introducing characters. And I mean, this is something that happens in just about every show. Those like first couple episodes, you kind of got to introduce the main cast as you're like going along. And then the other thing that occurred to me is that, you know, this is like, I don't think folks expected this show to be as successful as it was, you know? And I was like it, I still think it's like a niche show, but like it certainly picked up some buzz within like the anime YouTube community. And so I think that, you know, with maybe part of it is just like maybe they didn't necessarily like have like the budget for like a 24 episode season or something like that, and maybe they were kind of just like, in wrapping it up the way that they did, maybe they were sort of predicting or sort of trying to anticipate if maybe they wouldn't get a season 2, which I mean it's unclear now if they will get a season 2, but I hope that it gets a season 2. I enjoyed it, you know. That's just kind of how I feel about it. But it's very real. This is a more niche thing. Like, this is not like your typical shonen that's gonna attract. This isn't Naruto. This isn't Boruto's dad.
Oh no.
Everyone calls it Boruto's dad. I hate how I kind of hate how that's the discourse of what Naruto has become.
Oh, because Boruto is the greatest anime of all time. No, I haven't seen a single episode of Boruto, and I probably won't ever watch a single episode of Boruto. But anyways, that's a digression.
Yeah, Ricky, we'll have our Naruto Boruto discussion later. But going back to what you said about not your typical shonen and this blowing up, one, I want to say, as I think I told you guys before, there's a live action movie now that came out like a week ago, which I was like, wait, what? That's wild. And maybe I'll probably watch it at some point later just to be like, well, I just want to see how they recontextualize things in a movie format. But as you said, going back to shonen anime and talking about that, the series was introduced to me. I forget what YouTube video I specifically was watching, and I feel very terrible. But it was basically they were discussing all the like shonen anime things that have become popular. So they use the obvious examples of like Shokugeki, where it's like it's a shonen anime about cooking, or even it's escaping my mind, but there's one about gambling too. It's like it's a shonen anime about gambling, and this was like it's a shonen anime about making someone admit they like you, and that's when it was first introduced to me, and I was like, is it gonna be like over dramatic? And then I watched like the opening, just the OP, because sometimes I'll just watch an OP just to see if I can get a general feel of a show.
What an amazing OP!
It is pretty incredible. The song is stuck in my head a lot of times.
Yep.
And they introduce a lot of like characters that are just flying around. It's very stylized. The weapon imagery I thought was good, although at the time I was like, is this going to be like a prevalent theme throughout the show? And it really wasn't, which I think I'm kind of glad for. Just because like maybe they did keep it a little bit more grounded than I was initially anticipating. It definitely did feel like the Death Note potato chip scene where it's like, okay, he is eating a potato chip. That's not something outrageous, but just the machinations of the characters' minds of how they're doing it and how like it's filmed, quote unquote, and how they like change the colors and like add sweat drops and tension. That's what makes it more interesting. If they had made it more exaggerated, where it's like every single thing is like an interpretation of someone actually like firing a weapon or a sword or something, I think I might have actually liked it less if they did that.
I see what you're saying. That's an interesting thought. But now what I'm thinking about is how the OP is like kind of a cool visual telling device for what is like one of the central like dynamics of the show, in my opinion, which is like this like relationship between like love and power, you know, in particular. Like it's kind of funny because I've been thinking about this, and Silver and I kind of had a conversation about this yesterday. But the idea that like what like prevents them, like the central obstacle that they have to learn, you know, is how to be vulnerable with each other, you know, and it's like brought up constantly throughout the show. Like Hayasaka talks about this, you know, where she's like, if one of them could just like express their emotions to each other, then they'd both really be happy. But because of the way that they sort of think about love and power, so they sort of seem to have this like view of power as like kind of like, and the show sets it up this way from the beginning with like the narrator's initial, you know, like vignette, but like they think of like power as like kind of something that you possess over like another person, and then they think of like and then they think of like love as like this like thing that entails like self-sacrifice, you know. And so because of that, like the ultimate obstacle that's in their way is sort of having to like overcome that and get to like a point where they see love as like something that like, I mean, is like more mutual, and like vulnerability as like a means towards like, you know, like getting to that point where you can like mutually love each other and stuff.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, speaking to your point about them getting in each other's way. Okay, I want to ask you two questions. As like identifying, you know, males, like who did you relate to more in the show, like Miyuki or Kaguya? Because personally, I'm just gonna say I related to Miyuki a lot more. He's a guy. He's played as a straight male, which is what I also identify as. That's just, I think, a base thing for me to relate to. I just found a lot of his like external, like I'm cool and calm and I've worked really hard to where I am and I'm really rigid on my schedule and everything. But like you see the behind the scenes that to get to that level just took so much like internal effort and strife. And then really in some way he's kind of kooky, kind of funny, kind of weird. Like, you know, he has some quirks, but he hides like them in the back of his mind because he's just like, no, I have to like get to where I am, and like it takes this type of behavior. And there's an interesting thought process about like how healthy is that for like the mind to sort of constantly, quote unquote, be on like all of the time. Like you never see him relax unless he's like completely by himself. Like remember when I forget the other character's name, but the other boy goes and asks Miyuki, he's like, hey, I like this girl. You obviously, because you present yourself as this cool and confident guy, must have experience with talking to girls. How do I do it? And we know, the audience knows, Miyuki has no idea what he's doing.
And then the narrator lets us know that he's a super virgin.
That he's just like not about it. But then
he says it like 3 times, I believe.
Yeah,
he really lets us know.
Yeah. And then but then in the process, he has to keep up that act of being this like confident, cool, like I know what I'm doing, like very straightforward guy. And the advice he gives the boy is not good. It's not like the best advice, I would say. It's pretty, it quote unquote works out, but it kind of lends credence to that, honestly, juvenile, immature way of thinking of just like, if you just do this thing without maybe thinking of the larger, like more problematic aspects of being like hyper aggressive male and like going for it, where it's like, there is a way to be assertive and like make your intentions known without completely terrifying the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. Which like doing that kind of like maneuver where you like slam your, arm against the locker, that's pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
I was thinking to myself, like, I would never. It actually reminded me of Into the Spider-Verse. When Miles like puts his hand on Gwen and it's just like, hey,
chill out, man, chill out. And it's also part of, to speak a little bit about that scene, it also sort of gets into like the idea of like virginity as like something, especially in like high school. Like, look, like this is like speaking from like my high school experience, and I imagine that it's not just like a thing that's like local to my high school experience. But actually, this is a bit of a tangent, but it's related. I think it's interesting how high school sort of functions as like I guess like there's some parallels between like high school and like society in this like anime in some ways. There's like societal expectations. And high school I think is like a place where like, I don't know, this is just me kind of like, ranting a little bit, but like it's a place where this like dynamic between like societal expectations and like you and how you choose to like react to them and stuff, and how those things kind of like influence your behavior. It's like a theater where that kind of plays out, and maybe arguably for like the first time, and like in particular in high school, because high school is like really like, it's all about appearances, it's about looking the coolest. And like in this particular high school, which is like an elite high school, you know what I mean, where most people are rich, like there's really this whole like sort of like status-based thing, this whole like class-based thing. And to sort of speak to like what you were talking about with like Miyuki, I think I also related with Miyuki because obviously like my background is not necessarily like Kaguya's. Like I didn't grow up in like an ultra rich family with like the expectations of growing up in an ultra rich family and everything that entails. And I identified with that sort of whole, trying, like working really hard to get good grades and to like be like athletic, and because I think that's truer to like my own like personal story of like growing up than it is like Kaguya's, for example.
Right.
In terms of personality and academics and all that, definitely related to the president more, but in terms of like just viewing the two and the mental psychological warfare that they're going through, I related to Hayasaka more than any other character because she was the one that more consistently was like, can you two just like be honest with each other for the love of God?
I guess I could also agree with like, I identify more with Hayasaka now as like a adult or young adult, but I definitely saw my high school, middle school self more in like Miyuki, which I guess is kind of the point because Hayasaka. Wait, how old is Hayasaka supposed to be?
Hayasaka's she's in the same class year as them, I believe.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, Hayasaka's like Kaguya's like childhood friend. Her dad like works, but she's also like her maid, kind of.
Her assistant.
Her assistant, yeah, because her dad is like, her dad like works for like the Shinomiya conglomerate or whatever.
Okay, that makes sense because I thought she was like, I don't know, a little bit older, even an adult. But her mindset is definitely supposed to be one of like sort of the viewer, but also like her own character. But yeah, I definitely see how it's like I rate the highest level like now.
That's a really good point. I actually hadn't thought about that much. She is kind of the viewer. She's also kind of the voice of reason in some ways.
Yeah, because I can think of. Oh, Silver, I also didn't mean to cut you off if you had more to say.
No, I definitely did.
Oh. Well, I was just going to say, there were definitely times I remember, especially like later college and even like going out into the world where, you know, people talk now about like the things they want to do. And it's like, wait, have you tried? Like, I get it. Like, this is actually going to go into my talk about like agency and how you as a person develop agency as you grow up. Like now at this age, you know, if there are still social pressures to like, you know, you can't just go out and just do whatever you want. I understand. You can't just always just like, hey, I don't like my job, I'm just going to quit and like travel the country. Like, sure, you can, but I understand the difficulties of doing that. But I definitely felt like in instances of just like, you have this bond with this person and you want to express yourself at like maybe this age where you're learning, I definitely felt a lot more. It's like, you should just tell them. You don't have to be like, write them a love letter, this gushing thing, but just be like, hey, you wanna hang out? Let's go get dinner. Let's go get this. It can be super innocuous and just very simple. Take those first steps. But definitely back in like high school and middle school, every single possible social interaction I would think of ever having with anyone that I had any sort of interest in was always like, I was thinking like 20 steps ahead, but not ever considering like the first step. And it just like, I think showed that sort of internal trauma that, you know, Miyuki and Kaguya were having. Like, for example, my favorite scene, or the episode I think I laughed at the most, was the episode where after they have each other's phone numbers, they literally spend, I think, the entire summer or most of the summer not contacting each other.
That is so real, though. Oh my god.
Yes, I felt such a kinship where it's like, oh, there were just so many times where it's like, I replay these moments in my head where it's like, oh, like, for like, it felt like forever, for days, weeks, months. You do like, oh, I could have the ability to contact this person, but you just never do. And then when it's over, you come back to school or whatever, and you're just like, you look back at yourself, you're like, why did I do anything? Like, what was actually stopping me from like doing what I wanted to do? And like, it sounds silly now, but I definitely felt like in middle school and high school, there's definitely that weird pressure of like, oh, I just can't you write the message, delete it, write it again, delete it. You get your friend to send it. Oh my God, the amount of times I was like, if you press send and then just don't give me my phone, I can't do anything about it.
I might have been that person that pressed send for you a couple times.
I didn't want to come out and say it, but yeah, you were definitely.
And you might have done it for me too. Right. Yeah, this might have just happened.
Yeah, but I think that shows like one very clear thing about maturity and like growing up that I've noticed is like, because I was like, what does it mean to be like mature and to like become an adult? I think it's the idea of like personal agency in the sense of like taking the steps towards accomplishing any sort of goal that you want to do, not necessarily in like a super aggressive or destructive way, but just acknowledging that like, hey, I'm gonna do this because I know it'll probably lead to something I will enjoy. Like the ramifications of maybe getting, well, I'll just say quote unquote shot down. Like you just like tell someone's like, hey, you want to go get dinner? And they're just like, oh, not today, maybe later, is not that bad, because the worst that happens is you end up back at square one, which is where you were at anyway.
Yep.
But the possibility of going further exists.
And this, what he's doing, is to go even further beyond.
Very true.
Also, may I just say, now that I think about it, everything that happens between the two main characters, it just made so much better for the simple fact that they have such a good supporting cast.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it, I think, yesterday, that like Chika and Ishigami are the literal polar opposites of each other and work fabulously with Kaguya and the president, whose name keeps escaping me, Shirogami or something.
Shirogane, yeah.
Oh my
Miyuki,
god,
Miyuki.
Ishigami.
Ishigami.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel so bad for him.
Upon first watch through, I didn't love Ishigami. Cause he has a couple moments where he's like a little bit like, I don't know. I'm going back and forth because it's like a little problematic. Like especially like the scene where he's sort of talking about like Chika's boobs or whatever, and Kaguya's boobs, and then Chika just kind of like hits him over the head, which is like hilarious. But then again, it's also like like real talk, like especially in like high school. You know what I mean? Like if you're just kind of like having like a moment where you're just kind of like talking with like a bro. At least this is like, and this is like a very like masculine, perspective. This is obviously speaking from like gendered experience, but like that is like a common thing. He didn't expect to be overheard. One would never say that around, like like it would be really problematic if he said that around them. And it's also like it's not like the show lets him get away with it. Although at other points it does sort of like with the locker scene or whatever, it does sort of like let the characters get away with stuff that is like on like the gray area of whether or not it's problematic or not, but or it is problematic.
We also have to keep in context with the fact that like we're talking from our like our high school like context and our perspectives. We have no idea how high school like life on the ground things are in Japan.
Yeah, and this is also like a cross-cultural perspective. Like we're looking at this through like Western eyes, which makes it like it makes it different. We just don't like there's some things that like we just don't understand because they're not a part of our experience. And we just won't understand. So that's like important. Thanks for like bringing that up, Silver.
Yeah, we're speaking from this ivory tower of at least 4 years removed, 5 years removed from high school, where it's like, yeah, look at you shameful people. Where I can definitely tell you in high school and middle school, I didn't always have the most, pure, most greatest, moments either. I can definitely see how it's like, I can look back at myself and be like, ugh, me back then, never. I didn't have the best, not intentions, that's not the word, but like, I had behavior that would be probably considered problematic, just like these characters. But I think that lends itself to like the show being like, oh, these characters are in high school and they're learning, and some of these moments, they're embarrassing, they're gray areas, they're learning, but at the same time, we're not endorsing them.
Yeah. I think the show does a good job to like emphasize that. Yeah. Without not directly saying that it needs to emphasize that.
Yeah, exactly. Without kind of like beating you over the head.
Well, except that one time it actually beat you over the
head. Like, she got me over the head.
Yeah. Wow.
But Ishigami's character is hilarious, man. Like his like morbidity is just so funny. Oh my god, when he's like, I'm just gonna go home to,
write my will or die.
Bro, there's like an episode where like it just like briefly, like as the episode is ending, it just like briefly like there's like a little like shot and it's like Ishigami holding a noose. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, that definitely was a moment where I was like, Jesus, this is hilarious. But it's also kind of dark.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's fine.
Yeah, this is the third time I rewatched the series, and this is the first time I caught that. It was wild. I had to replay. Like, wait, did I see what I just saw?
Oh man.
My personal favorite Ishigami scene is the scene where it's like him and Miyuki are talking about Kaguya, and then Kaguya's talking to, I don't think she's talking to Chika. She's talking to like some other girl.
Yeah.
And they're both talking about how the other person was wrong. And that just related to me so much about how many times like you have like a slight misunderstanding with like it might be like a girl or something, and it wouldn't even be anything romantic or even anything that serious or whatever. It could even be something innocuous that's just like in class you like disagreed with them on their interpretation of like a paragraph you had to read or whatever. And then you just go to your boys and be like, yo, guys, like, I'm mad. Now validate me and tell me why I'm right.
Uh,
and Ishigami being that like, no, don't apologize. You're totally correct. Girls are dumb and icky, and I was just like, oh my god, so funny.
Okay, real talk though, now that I'm thinking about it, that actually was the first arc. Like the whole Kaguya being sick thing, that was the first arc of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was funny the way they handled it. Like I loved, but I'm also like a big like philosophy nerd, but I love like the Freudian id and like the ego thing and then like using that. Like Hayasaka of course would be the one to like bring that up, and then Hayasaka just kind of there, but her like telling like Miyuki like, you're gonna be by yourself, but don't take advantage of her. But if you did take advantage of her, nobody would know. I was like, what are you trying to do right now, Hayasaka? What is going on?
That was a very tough scene to read and understand, because we don't really like, we've seen a lot of her, but we don't really understand her as a character too well.
Yeah, at least like
yeah.
Like, I get maybe, okay, just like headcanon thinking. I get what she was saying, where it's just like, oh, you guys will have privacy, so like you can maybe actually admit your feelings. But then she threw in the don't take advantage of her thing. But if you did, no one would notice. And I was like, so wait, you are concerned, but what? Like, I was a little confused. Honestly, it didn't last that long because, like, again, the show does do well to not just like endorse like anything super duper wrong. Like, it's supposed to be taken like at surface value, just like kind of tongue in cheek, just a funny phrase, because she's saying it as she's like kind of leaving really quickly.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be like, oh, that's kind of funny, and it makes Miyuki more nervous. But at the same time, it was still just like, well, I mean, he doesn't have to get in the bed. I know personally, if I was sick to the point of being delirious, which I don't think I've ever really been, because I just don't get sick that often, I definitely wouldn't want to wake up to someone just in my bed.
Yeah.
Like, as even someone I do know, I'd probably be like ultimately like okay and be like, oh, like okay, but like, you know, it still was like, you could like be there in my room. There's a chair. You can go. You can sit there. You can like, you know. And I get it. It's like supposed to be cute and for comedy. And again, this might just be a cultural thing. But I knew like that scene in particular is one of the ones where I'm just like, oh, now we're having an arc, and it's supposed to lead to a misunderstanding. But this is like kind of also getting to like some of my faults with the show, where it's like I feel like maybe some of the misunderstandings could have been done in a more, I don't know, relatable, sensible way. Because I can, again, might be cultural. I can definitely say from my standpoint, if I had a friend who was sick and they were like needed really taken care of and like they were in bed, I would like, you know, help them. But I would never think of like getting in the bed or like.
Well, she did pull him. She did pull him into the bed, though. That's like important to note. She grabbed them and like threw him onto the bed.
True.
And
that
then
dude's like twice her size. Like,
and then he fell asleep.
You can't tell me that you can't just like, you know, wiggle his way out of there.
Yeah, he could have wiggled his way out of there. But also like the sheer awkwardness of the situation.
Right. I get it. Like I said, ultimately, I get it. It was just one of those where it's like, oh, this is like rom-com, not BS, but it's like rom-com drama, and like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
They're falling into these tropes of accidental touching and stuff, and it's like, oh, not bad in context, but it's just like another trope that you just kind of note that it's like, oh, you know, shorthand to explain.
Yeah.
I do like how like it kind of like breaks from whatever a generic rom-com would have done in that situation, where Shirogami just like straight up falls asleep because he's been sleep deprived because he works so hard. I thought that was an interesting take on it.
Man, the man works himself to death. And like, well, but speaking about that, going into like, and also speaking about the other faults maybe I have with the show, I get that Kaguya Sama is like rich and all that, and Miyuki, and the sort of dichotomy of Miyuki being this ultra hard worker and Kaguya Sama being rich. I felt like Miyuki's like on the fly planning and everything was a little bit more enjoyable to me than Kaguya's 18 million steps ahead planning. But then I felt it was sort of undercut by her just having money access to a lot of things
Yeah.
that allow her to move things, which for the show, it's like, oh, it's over dramatized, it's fun, it's all that. But I definitely like when we talk about like the psychological aspect of it, I found so much more enjoyment about like Miyuki figuring out like the card trick Chica was doing,
Yeah.
or like him just like on the fly, like thinking of ways that he could do it because like the whole cat ears thing when he was like trying to contain himself in
Oh,
diapers.
I love that one. I love that one. That's one of my favorites. I made an Instagram post that, you know, you probably saw it, that had scenes from that.
Oh my god.
Mariage.
Mariage. Shout out to the narrator. I think he's perfect. And I think within the context of a show where like hyperbole in like high school go hand in hand, the narrator is like perfect. To accentuate that, just wanted to say that really quickly.
And a little bit for me, like the show doesn't have like an overarching plot, so like he kind of fills like that void a little bit by like kind of like inserting a little bit of a structure. It's not really like a story structure, but like he kind of just like adds like you know what's going on because of the commentator.
Right. Although I will admit by like the end when he kept reiterating that this is a game of war or love or whatever, I was like, okay, I'm like 10 episodes in. You don't have to keep telling me. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
We know what we're watching. We know what we're in for.
Yeah. That's a good point. Like it was interesting with like the last arc, the way that it wrestled with like, and it was really like throughout the first season itself. You know, I think it's like introduced at the beginning, but sort of Kaguya having to wrestle with these like expectations and like just like how like different Kaguya's upbringing is like from like the upbringing of like most people, like even down to like her like lack of familiarity with like lewd terms or whatever, like leading to two mishaps, leading to like the wiener incident and leading to the incident where Kaguya's like first time or whatever. Yeah. Where she like thinks that like sex is kissing, and then Chica has to tell her what sex is. Oh,
right.
But you know, sort of getting to the more like pernicious like aspects of that, you know, like all the expectations, you know, and sort of like for her like overcoming like, you know, it's like built into like, I mean, both of the characters sort of like overcoming that. These like I guess like kind of like lies that they've told themselves that they've been told by their like families. Like Kaguya's is very explicit. Like her family, like credo even says like love like no one or something along the lines of that. And then Miyuki is like in this like elitist high school has just learned that he needs to like always keep up appearances in order to be like successful. But with Kaguya in particular, we see that like play out, like sort of like all the like the expectations and stuff, and that kind of dates like or connects to like your whole piece about like agency and like how that's like a part of like being an adult, you know, growing up, and like for her it's like tied to her personal development, like her character development, to sort of like choose her friends over what her like family wants her to do, and that's just like an interesting thing. You know, of course, like keeping attention squarely focused on the fact that like a lot of what's going on has to do with the fact that like she comes from this like background of like ridiculous privilege.
Oh, speaking of also something you said, one question I still have, and this is me personally, are Kaguya and Chica friends?
Yeah, they're friends.
Yeah, they're friends.
There were just so many times, maybe it's just when I was watching the second time, where it's like, wow, Kaguya has these pretty terrible thoughts towards Chica.
Yeah.
It just made me like, don't get me wrong, I understand that like they're friends and like it's like building up to it, blah blah blah. And obviously there are times with your friend where you're like, you have your one friend, you know, that one friend you have that you're like, oh my god, like dog, don't be like this, like you're ruining my plans. But at the same time, I just felt maybe like, could you guys talk about like the examples of having them actually being friends? Because I felt like there were just so many times where it's like, yeah, they're cordial, and ultimately Kaguya sees Chica's value, but maybe it is her character flaw of trying to always just use people that I kind of thinking about. Like, am I wrong? Like, can you guys tell me? Am I like digging too deep into this? Like, I don't know. Part of me was like, are y'all friends? Like, she's definitely friends with Hayasaka.
Yeah.
She's definitely like close with her. And she definitely wants to be close with Miyuki, and they form some sort of relationship sort of at the end. We already talked about the ending. But are Chika and Kaguya friends? I'm not so sure.
I would say yes for the simple fact that like I think the episode I'm gonna point to, I think it's like either the very last episode or the second to last episode when they were building up the fireworks scene, when she's going like kind of like mentally retelling kind of a little bit of her upbringing. She notes that like out of like everyone, because like at first she tried to be isolated because she didn't want to trust anyone, but Chica was the one that was like consistently like trying to be there for her, and she recognized that and acknowledged that, and she refers to her as her first like true friend.
And then there's also the whole thing with like, okay, so low key, I noticed this on the second watch too. Chica has these like moments where she's just like really selfish,
Very
Oh,
selfish.
very selfish.
yeah.
Like the cheating and like the card game, or what is like another example?
The best example that I can give is when they were planning summer plans, and she's like, "Oh, like the
yeah.
president was
Oh
like,
my
let's go
God.
to the state festival or something like that."
And she's like, I'll be in Spain.
And they're like, "Oh, okay, we can." Well, Ishigami, of course, is the one that points out, "Well, why can't we go?" No, because like Chica was like, "You're not gonna go to that without me, right? That'd be so mean." And Ishigami is just like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. You're gonna be in Spain having fun. Why should we not have fun here just because you're not here?" And she just like took that as such a massive insult, and she stormed out crying.
I
Yeah.
know. It's just like it was one of those two where it's just like, oh, this is just Chica's character. But honestly, I definitely felt like I'm Ishigami in this sense. It's just like,
Yeah, me too.
I
Me
definitely
too.
also have planned things where, like, for example, this actually recently happened. So there's like one cheesecake factory around where I live, and like we had planned to go to it, and then just one person's like, "Oh, I'm gonna be in Hong Kong," and we're like, "Oh, that sucks." We were like, so are we going? And then we kind of made another group chat without that person, and part of me thought like, oh yeah, we're still gonna go, right? And then I remember messaging people like, are we still going chicken? And everyone's like, oh, but what about so and so? And I'm like, is that a no? And everyone's like, oh, you're right, let's go. And then when we came back, the person was like, oh, I heard you guys went without me, and like,
Whoa.
and I was like, in my head, I'm like,
You were in Hong
realize
Kong.
we can go back.
Well, there's also the whole. So now I'm thinking that there's some parallelism between like that scene where like, I mean, that would be something to deconstruct, but that scene where like Chica's kind of in the wrong because it is up to her. It's kind of like a choice that she's making to go to. Oh, that's what it is. It's up to her. It's a choice that she's making to go to Spain. But with Kaguya, and this is like another moment, and this is a nice segue back to the friendship thing. Kaguya had plans with Chika's sister, and Miyuki's sister to go shopping, but she wasn't able to go because of something that was out of her control, which was her family and like her dad just suddenly calling her up for basically no reason to Kyoto. And then they decide to just not do the shopping trip because it just wouldn't be the same without like the point is for all of them to go together.
Yeah.
So, but I guess that's an interesting thing to think about. But yeah.
Man, this show,
Yeah.
it does really present a lot of the way they do it in the vignette style. Presents a lot of like, oh, I remember this moment. It reminds me of this moment.
Yeah.
My life, or this moment in my life, or even I could see myself looking at this moment as an older person being like, oh wow, you're so young, you have so much to learn, the world is so big out there. Honestly, though, that I can say, if I was like a high school student, I would hate someone like Chica. Like, I would just be so, would it be honestly kind of the way the other characters are, where it's just like, oh my god, this person, but they're kind of endearing, but still, I could just see myself like just being like, oh, like, how was I ever friends with this person? But then being older and being like, oh no, this person did provide like a valuable like interest to my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Very true. Yeah. I'm a little surprised that the scene with like, which is like my personal favorite scene, is like Miyuki trying to get better at volleyball. But that's sort of it connects because it relates to like Chica's like her redeeming qualities, because she like does sacrifice a lot to help Miyuki become like decent at volleyball. Lots of hours. And then at the end, the scene where she's just like, I raised that boy.
Yeah. The volleyball scene also was definitely, because I didn't expect Miyuki's like, oh, he's just inept at sports. I was like, wait, I didn't expect this. I thought he was like supposed to be this person that's, the typical blonde-haired like protagonist who's just like pretty good at everything at sports and da 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 da. And it's just like, oh, he's actually practicing, and that speaks to the volume of like how much you build up the preparation in yourself to do this honestly innocuous event that like probably isn't that big of a deal.
Oh, but in high school, it's the biggest deal.
In high school, it definitely is. The brand. He calls it like, no, I can't do this. The perfect Shirigami brand will be ruined.
I think I kind of relate to this too because volleyball is like the sport that I'm worst at. So
I am the
so
worst.
bad
I am
at
abysmal
volleyball.
at volleyball.
It's like, whenever someone is like, oh, we should go play volleyball, it's like, do you play volleyball? I'm like, I am generally athletic. It's like, I'm not going to sit here and say like I'm bad, but at the same time, it's like, I can have coordination to generally hit the ball. I'm not going to be like Miyuki. I'm not going to slap myself in the face, obviously. But at the same time, it is a thing where it's just like, ugh, like this sport is, you think it's simple, just hit it over the net because people play it casually a lot. Then you start playing, and then maybe 2 points in, you realize how woefully inept you are.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so I think we've probably talked about just about everything with the show. We should probably like start wrapping up about this point on our first podcast. Woo! Woo! But I guess like the last thing I sort of wanted, I mean, it might be a good point of like, I don't know, discussion to talk about like what we might want to see in like a future season. And it gives me like an opportunity to bring up something that Danny and I noticed. Danny noticed it first, but I think it would actually be cool to see it play out in like the next season. And it's sort of the dynamic with like Shiro Gane's like sister, Miyuki's sister, and how she has like very clearly has a crush on Kaguya. Like she blushes red when she's like talking about Kaguya to Miyuki in like that like one scene with like that one interaction between Kaguya and Shirogane's sister. So it would just be cool to see that like as something that like plays out in the next season.
That must have passed me by both times I watched it because I like remember what you're talking about, but I definitely just took it more of a like it's just like a little sister who's infatuated with your friend. Like I've noticed that before in other people where younger siblings are infatuated with older sibling friends. Like my brothers were kind of like that, but not to that extent. But like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that.
Yeah. The reason why, like it passed me up like this is the third time watching it. Passed me up the past 2 times, and the only reason why I made that claim this time is because I noticed how much they really emphasized how much she was blushing, and like they zeroed in on her face.
They really like did a close up on her face.
Oh man, Jesus Christ! I have to rewrite my wants and needs for the next season.
Hopefully it gets a next season. I think it merits a next season. I would watch it if it got a next season. It got a live action adaptation. It should get a next season.
Yeah. Like I'm really tempted to just read the manga and go forward, but I don't want to take away from the narrator and how much he adds to the value of the show.
Yeah.
And also personally, I just find that comedy coming at me like through like animation and like I'm like reading, I'm an active participant in the turning of pages, in the pace, in the so on and so forth. Like a writer / mangaka can impact that. Like for example, when I'm reading something like Berserk, for example, I have to take my time because some of the art is just so gorgeous. Yeah. Versus when I'm reading, I've gone back and looked at maybe some old DBZ manga where it's just like I'm blazing through because the fights are just kind of like going on, and Toriyama's just a genius at directing action through. But I think just personally, the way this show is with its comedic bits, I think just the animation just makes it funnier, and the characters' reactions, and like honestly, I also personally am just someone who enjoys listening and hearing and the music and all that more than I enjoy reading. Yeah, that's just a personal thing. But yeah, what do you guys have like predictions or maybe like wants for like, let's say the next arc? Obviously there is a manga and we can go figure it out, but like if
Really
knowing what you
tempted.
know now, what would you like to see or what you think we're gonna see?
Well, I would hopefully like to see like more of an overarching plot. Like maybe like we have yet to see like I mean I don't know if there's a possibility the show won't do this, like an antagonist or like some opposing like force against them two getting together. I think would provide a good element to the show. I want more development from Hayasaka. I want her to get more screen time because she's best girl. I guess more just like diving into the personality of Chika as well, because we get a few small glimpses of what her true personality is, and then because like they make it a point to emphasize she's the daughter of a politician, so she knows how to try to manipulate people, or she at least attempts to try to manipulate people in situations. So it'd be really cool to see if that comes into play. Also, the whole fact about the whole like ramen kings, like the four ramen kings, was brought up repeatedly in the final like few episodes. So maybe that is gonna be something moving forward because Chika was recognized by one of the kings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about the Robin King. That was funny. That was a good Chica
funny.
like character like moment. That was just like it also made me really hungry.
Yeah, dude.
Speaking of,
Yeah.
I really want ramen. We had ramen yesterday, but
yesterday we want ramen again. I guess for me, I'd like them to, bring in like Kaguya's like background more. Maybe like that's like the antagonizing force, like Kaguya's dad or something. And like of course we can't forget about middle-aged dad Dio.
Yeah.
He needs more than 4 lines. We're talking about Miyuki's dad.
Oh yeah.
You have the best voice actor in all of fucking Japan. You gotta get him more lines.
Oh my god, yeah, that man. Jesus.
Also, there were like points throughout the show where they, especially when they had like the text, you know, like on screen, where I was like, "Is this a JoJo's reference?"
No,
it
stop.
definitely was a JoJo's reference.
If you open that door, you can't close it.
Good. I love JoJo.
I mean, yes, JoJo's is my favorite too, but I'm telling you, man, you fall in. Next thing you know, it's been 3 months, and like you're like everything's a JoJo's reference now. Everything. Not thinking something's a JoJo's reference, it's a JoJo's reference.
You thought this was a rom-com, but it was I.
Dio.
You thought this was a rom-com, but it was I, JoJo's.
Oh man.
I guess speaking for me, things I want to see. I definitely want to see more of Chika. I also kind of, I guess, want to see more of her sisters because they like pop in and they're like mentioned. They're given like a sort of screenshot, and it's like, oh yeah, they exist and they're a family. Obviously, they explore in more families. I also like one thing I thought that was pretty cool was the evolution of that like other couple. Again, I forget their names, but it's the couple that like Kaguya and Miyuki give advice that is. Miyuki's advice is pretty terrible. Kaguya's advice is okay, I guess, but sort of seeing how, in an essence, it's sort of interesting. You have these two very successful, very like on the outwards, well-meaning, like controlled, calm individuals, but they have some serious maturity issues. Yet you have these two, what most people would say are simpler, not as, you know, maybe as ambitious characters who have found sort of this little piece of happiness doing what they just enjoy doing because they just naturally are more empathetic towards each other. They have a higher EQ. They just know how to like enjoy moments between each other. Like when they were volunteering and just doing stuff, it was like, oh wow. I would look at that even as a grown person and be like, that is a that's a good chemistry building couple right there for a bunch of high schoolers. And I want to see like more of those parallels of like, you know, Miyuki and Kaguya could get together and they could be this great thing, but they need to develop themselves to get to the point where they each obviously have insecurity issues, and everyone has them, but to where they get to the point where they can trust each other to just, you know, at least even just be friends. Because, you know, at first they're talking and they're always like, yeah, we're student council, we're so cool, we work together. But towards the end, you start to see it's like, no, like I'll bike you, or like we'll hang out, I'll take you on the fireworks, and like it's not just, you know, I want to do it because student council. I'm not doing it because I like you. When they're open and honest and they're just like, hey, like let's hang out. That's what I really want to see.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, another thing I really want to see is at the bare minimum, I want them to hold hands. I want them to do something.
Yeah.
It's 12 episodes. We don't even get holding hands. What is this?
I mean, but the whole show is like, at least so far, it's like, what is it? Unfulfilled desire. It's like it's about like the play of like desire and like, you know, them like desiring each other and like doing these schemes and stuff, and these schemes like keeping them apart, but also it's like stuff that they're doing together. So it's like stuff that arguably makes them be more into each other than they would be otherwise. But yeah, well, I think that about wraps it up.
Yeah.
You know,
Can't think of
our thoughts
anything
on Kaguya Sama, our first episode. Yeah, I mean, this has been lovely.
Do we want to give it a rating in terms of rom-coms?
In terms of rom-coms,
Yeah.
I don't even know how we would do that. I mean, I haven't seen enough rom-coms to give it a rating.
So
I would give it 4
personally,
highest suckers out of
I'm
5.
against number ratings because I feel like people get too drowned into them. Don't get me wrong. There's a bunch of reviewers I watch that give number ratings, like for example, Fantano on music, like, but number ratings just kind of lead people into like, oh, you rated this one of this and this one of this. What does it mean? So more of a general like sentence naming. I know for a fact this is like in rom-coms, it's not my favorite. My favorite rom-com is still His or Her Circumstances because it kind of takes this whole Kaguya thing. It was Gynax, and it kind of makes it even, in my opinion, better. The whole like exploration of all the things we want to hide from people, but then how we actually get together. It's not as like deeply psychological, but in some ways it's kind of funnier for it. It's funnier for being more grounded, like more relatable. I would definitely put Kaguya Sama. I also haven't watched many sitcoms. I guess it has to be like second behind His or Her Circumstances. It's good, it's enjoyable, it's topical. There's a live action movie. It's definitely easy to digest because of the vignette style. So I would say if you're into anime, and even if you haven't watched a rom-com really, if you like could take something that you can just easily get through, like it's not a hard watch, you don't have to like always be paying attention, I would say watch it. That's what I would say. Yeah,
I think I agree with that assessment. Yeah, okay, so I think that wraps it up. Yeah, this has been Anime Rambling Boys. Peace, love, swag, everyone. See ya next time.